I never meant to stay as long as I did at the little corner cafe near the bus stop. It wasn't even that good. I froze, because that was my order. Oh yeah? That's yeah. She laughed softly, like she'd caught me off guard on purpose. You always drank it that way. I remember. It had been years since she would have seen me drink anything. But she remembered. I found myself watching the way her hands moved, slow, steady, folding a napkin into a neat square before placing her cup on top of it. I looked away quickly, pretending to check my phone, but my screen was empty except for a half-typed message to no one I'd actually sent it to. We sat at separate tables, only a few feet apart. That invisible line between familiarity and distance hung there, like the space between two notes of a song that might resolve, but hasn't yet. You still playing soccer? She asked after a pause. I shook my head. No, college didn't really. It just didn't work out that way. She nodded, eyes dropping to her coffee. That happens. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable, but heavier than small talk should allow. I thought about saying more, about how classes felt hollow, about how my friends were moving on and I wasn't. But instead, I just traced the rim of my cup with my thumb, grounding myself in the motion. Funny, she said after a while, almost to herself. You always seemed like you knew where you were going. I almost laughed, but it caught in my throat. I think that was an act. Her smile lingered just long enough to feel like she understood more than she was supposed to. The cafe door opened, letting in a gust of cold air. We both glanced over at the same time, then back to each other, like we'd been caught sharing something we hadn't spoken aloud. After a moment, she stood, slipping her bag over her shoulder. Well, she said, almost like she was ending a meeting, I'll see you around. I nodded, trying to sound casual. Yeah, sure. But as she walked past my table, she paused. For the briefest moment, her hand touched the back of my chair, not enough to count as contact, but enough to make me notice. And then she leaned down just slightly, her voice low enough that no one else could hear. This stays between us, she said. When the door closed behind her, the cafe felt emptier than before. I stared at my untouched coffee, the folded napkin on her table, and wondered what exactly it was that needed to stay between us that I told myself it was coincidence the next time I saw her. Same cafe, different afternoon. She was at the corner table with a book half open, glasses resting low on her nose. She looked up when I walked in, like she'd been waiting. You again, she said, and it sounded more like an observation than a greeting. Yeah, guess this is my spot, I muttered, ordering the same burnt coffee as always. When I sat down across from her, it felt almost natural, though no one had invited me. She didn't move her book aside. She just closed it halfway and placed her hand flat on top, like she was saving the page. You ever finish a book and feel like it knew you too well? She asked. I blinked. Can't say I read enough for that. Her smile tugged sideways, not quite amused, not quite sad. Maybe that's safer. I wanted to ask what she meant, but I was too busy trying to figure out why my chest tightened every time she looked directly at me. We fell into an odd rhythm after that. Every few days, we'd end up there. Sometimes she talked. Sometimes we sat in silence, both pretending to read or scroll. But it wasn't silence like with strangers. It was silence that said you don't have to perform right now. One rainy afternoon, I offered to walk her home. She lived only a few streets away, though I already knew that. Inside her house, everything was tidy but not staged, like she kept the spaces livable for herself, not for anyone visiting. A faint citrus scent lingered, probably from the candle burning low on the counter. You still drink tea? She asked, setting a kettle on the stove. Yeah, I said quickly, though I didn't. I just wanted to keep the conversation from ending. She handed me a mug once it was ready, and we sat on opposite ends of her couch. She tucked her legs beneath her, her body angled toward me, but her gaze fixed on the steam rising from her cup. You know, she said softly, I almost moved out of this neighborhood a few years ago, after the divorce. Thought it would be easier not to run into memories. I glanced at her, but she didn't look back. Why didn't you? She shrugged, taking a slow sip. I don't know. Maybe I wanted to prove I could stay. Or maybe I was just too tired to leave. Her words sat heavy in the room. I thought about my own half-abandoned plans, The way my phone screen filled with unsent messages to people I didn't know how to talk to anymore. I know that tired, I said quietly. Her eyes flicked toward me then, sharp but soft, like she hadn't expected me to admit it. For a moment, neither of us looked away. And in that pause, my mind betrayed me, flashing an image of leaning closer, of crossing a line I wasn't supposed to cross. I swallowed hard, pressing my thumb against the handle of the mug until it hurt. "This isn't weird for you, is it?" I asked finally, breaking the spell. Her lips parted like she might laugh, but no sound came. Instead, she set her cup down on the table, her fingers lingering on the rim. "Weird is relative, don't you think?" I didn't answer, because if I did, I'd have to admit that yes, it was weird. Weird, risky, forbidden. She was my friend's mom, 25 years older, someone I'd only ever known through the edges of childhood memories. But sitting there, with the rain tapping against her window and the faint citrus candles still burning, it didn't feel wrong. It felt like the first time in a long time someone saw through me without trying. I shifted slightly, setting my mug beside hers on the table. The cups touched, just barely, porcelain against porcelain. And she noticed. Her hand, still resting near the mugs, brushed against mine as she pulled back. Not accidental, not deliberate, just enough. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. The next time, it wasn't planned. I stopped by the cafe later than usual, and she wasn't there. I almost left. But as I walked home, I saw her car in the driveway, porch lights spilling across the steps. Something tugged at me, stupidly, like I'd been left out of a rhythm I hadn't realized I depended on. Before I could talk myself out of it, I texted, "You around?" Her reply came fast. "Come by. I just made tea." Inside, the same citrus scent, the same tidy warmth. But this time, she looked different. Hair pulled up carelessly, sweater sleeves pushed past her elbows. Less composed, more real. We sat on the couch again, close enough that the fabric between us felt charged. She handed me a mug, our fingers brushing. Neither of us said anything. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, the faintest crease forming between her brows. She set it face down, almost too quickly. "Everything okay?" I asked. She nodded, but didn't elaborate. Just sipped her tea. I wanted to ask, but I didn't. Instead, I noticed the way her foot tapped once against the rug, restless. And then, "You shouldn't be here so much," she said suddenly, without looking at me. The words landed sharp. I opened my mouth, then closed it. My chest tightened, like she'd yanked a cord I didn't know was there. "I mean," she exhaled, shaking her head. "People talk. My son, your friend, he wouldn't." She stopped herself. I shifted, leaning forward, mug balanced between my palms. "Do you want me to stop coming?" Her eyes flicked to mine. "Long enough. Too long." Then away. That's not what I said. The silence stretched again, thick. My thoughts tripped over themselves. She doesn't want me here / she does, but can't admit it / I should leave. The clock ticked loud in the kitchen. "Tea's getting cold," she murmured, like it mattered. I set my mug down, fingers lingering on the rim, waiting for hers to move. They didn't. A knock at the door broke it. Both of us flinched. She stood quickly, smoothing her sweater, opening the door just enough to speak with someone outside. Neighbor maybe. I couldn't hear. I caught only fragments. "Yes, tomorrow. Thanks." When she returned, she wouldn't meet my eyes. She sat farther this time, the cushion between us a deliberate boundary. I wanted to say something, anything to pull her back, but the words tangled. Instead, I just watched her tuck her hair behind her ear, slow, deliberate. The moment was right there, suspended. A pull so strong it made my throat dry. I leaned, just slightly, and she felt it, her breath catching, eyes darting toward mine before she looked away. Close. Too close. And then she stood, gathering the mugs, her voice steadier than her hands. "You should go. It's late." I hesitated in the doorway, searching her face for something, permission, a sign. All I got was the softest flicker of her gaze, landing on my mouth before she turned away to "It happened on a walk." Nothing planned, just me cutting across the park, her spotting me on the path. She was carrying groceries, and I offered to help. She didn't argue. The sun was low, evening softening the edges of everything. We walked slower than we needed to, her bag of apples tucked under my arm. You didn't have to, she said, not looking at me. I wanted to. I replied too quickly. She gave a small smile, the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes. That's the problem. I didn't know what she meant at first, but the words followed me like the crunch of gravel under our shoes. We found a bench, and she set down her other bag. She rubbed her hand where the handle had pressed too hard into her palm. I caught myself staring at the faint red line there, wanting to touch it, to smooth it away. I shoved my hands into my pockets instead. For a while, neither of us spoke. Just the rustle of trees, the sound of a dog barking somewhere far off. You ever feel, she said finally, like you're living two lives at once? The one people expect and the one you actually want. Her voice was quiet, tired. Every day, I admitted, before I could stop myself. She turned then, eyes locking on mine like she was searching for proof I wasn't just saying it. Something in her softened. I don't know what I'm doing, she whispered. It wasn't a confession meant for me, but it landed in my chest anyway. I swallowed. Neither do I. Her laugh was small, but it cracked at the edges. That's different. You're 20. You're supposed to not know. She stopped, pressed her lips together. I'm supposed to have it figured out. The silence after that wasn't heavy. It was fragile. I shifted closer on the bench, just enough that our shoulders almost touched. My pulse jumped. She didn't move away. I thought I'd be okay alone, she said, her eyes on the ground. But sometimes the quiet is too loud. I felt the words like they belonged to me too. My throat tightened. Yeah, I know that kind of quiet. She glanced at me, and in that moment something cracked open. Her guard, maybe. Mine too. You can't, she started, then stopped, shaking her head. This is wrong. I know, I said. My voice came out lower than I meant. But it doesn't feel wrong. Her breath caught, and I swear she almost reached for me. Her hand twitched in her lap, then stilled. I imagined leaning in, just closing the space, pressing my forehead against hers, telling her I'd been waiting for her to say something, anything. The thought was so vivid it almost felt like it happened. But it didn't. Instead, she stared straight ahead, her voice barely above the wind. Do you ever wonder what would happen if you just stopped caring what people thought? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell her I'd already wondered, every night since that first cafe encounter. But the words lodged in my chest, too sharp to push out. We sat there, side by side, not touching. The sky dimmed. The grocery bag rustled at our feet. And then she turned, her eyes holding mine with a force that left me breathless. Tell me, she said quietly. She didn't finish the question. She didn't have to. The world stilled around us, waiting. After the bench, things didn't move forward. They stalled. The next week, she wasn't at the cafe. Not once. I checked at different times, circled the block more than I'd admit. Nothing. I thought maybe she was busy, or tired, or avoiding me. All three felt possible. On the fourth day, I saw her car in the driveway. Lights on. But I didn't knock. Instead, I texted, "You okay?" The three dots appeared, then vanished. Nothing came through. The silence hit harder than a no. It was 2 weeks later when I finally saw her again. Grocery store, middle of the afternoon. I almost didn't recognize her at first. Her hair down, no makeup, shoulders drawn in. She spotted me, froze for half a second, then forced a smile. "Hey," I said carefully. "Hi," she replied. Just that. Her cart was half full, mostly basics. She fiddled with the strap of her bag, eyes darting everywhere but me. "Been busy?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Something like that. I wanted to push. Instead, I nodded, shifting awkwardly from one foot to the other. People passed us in the aisle, carts squeaking. Then, without meeting my eyes, she said, "My son's coming back this weekend." The words landed heavy, like she'd been carrying them and finally dropped them at my feet. I swallowed. Oh, right. Yeah. He'll probably be around for a while. Taking time off school. She finally looked at me then, but not in the way she used to. More like she was checking to see how much I understood. And I did. The cafe, the walks, the silences, they had been possible only because no one else was watching. And now? Eyes everywhere. I forced a smile I didn't feel. That's good. For you. She nodded, quickly. Yeah. For me. We both knew it wasn't that simple. After that, I stopped going to the cafe. At first it was deliberate. If she wasn't there, I wouldn't sit waiting like some kid. But later, it became easier not to. My days blurred. Coffee at home. Walks without benches. Unsent texts stacking up in my phone. I miss it. I miss us. / are you okay? / do you think about it too? None of them left drafts. My thumb hovered, then backed away. One night, I walked past her house. Lights on in the living room. The shadow of someone else moving inside. Her son, probably. I stood across the street, watching for too long, until it felt almost shameful. I didn't knock. Didn't wave. Didn't want to see the look on her face if she opened the door. Weeks passed. The rhythm we had dissolved, leaving me with empty evenings and too much silence. I tried to convince myself it didn't matter, that it hadn't been real. But some moments stuck, replaying without permission, her hand brushing mine near the mugs, the way her eyes had searched mine on the bench, that low voice saying this stays between us. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. I sat on my bed one night, phone in hand, drafting one last message. Do you want me to stop? I stared at the words. They felt too sharp, too final. My chest ached with the weight of them. In the end, I never hit send. The screen went black, and I just sat there, waiting for something that wasn't coming to. It was late evening when it finally happened. Not in the cafe, not on a bench. On her doorstep. I hadn't planned to be there. I'd gone for a walk, headphones in, but nothing playing, and somehow my steps led me down her street. The porch light was on, a faint glow through the curtains. I almost kept walking. Almost. But then the door opened before I could turn away. She stepped out, sweater wrapped tight, like she'd been about to take the trash out or just needed air. She froze when she saw me. You shouldn't be here. Her voice wasn't sharp, just tired. I know. My throat was dry. I wanted to see you. Silence stretched. The hum of a street lamp overhead. The faint buzz of crickets. She sighed, leaning against the doorframe. My son's asleep. I nodded, words tangling in my chest. I could have left. Should have. But instead, I stepped closer, keeping my voice low. Did I do something? I mean, back then. The way you pulled away. Her eyes flicked up to mine, steady, almost defiant. You didn't do anything wrong. Then why? I trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Her hands gripped the edge of the sweater. Because it scared me. The words hit harder than anything I'd imagined. I'm too old, she said softly. I'm supposed to know better. And you're supposed to be young enough not to care. I do care, I said, the words spilling before I could stop them. My voice cracked, but I didn't look away. Maybe too much. Her face shifted, something breaking through the calm she always carried. She pressed her lips together, exhaled slowly. I can't, she whispered, then stopped. Shook her head. I don't know if I can. I stepped closer, just enough that the porch light caught both of us. My hands hung useless at my sides. I'm not asking for forever. I'm not even asking for tomorrow. My voice faltered. I don't want this to disappear like it never mattered. Her eyes shone in the dim light. Not tears exactly, just that sharp sheen of someone holding too much inside. You think it didn't matter? She asked, almost incredulous. I swallowed. I don't know. You went quiet. You left me guessing. She leaned back against the frame, rubbing her temple like the words cost her something. I thought if I cut it off, it would hurt less. For both of us. And does it? She looked at me then. Really looked. The porch light hummed above us, moths batting against the bulb. She shook her head, just once. No, it doesn't. For a moment, everything stilled. The months of silence, the half gestures, the words we hadn't said, all of it pressed close, filling the air between us. I almost reached for her hand. Almost. But stopped myself, my fingers curling into a fist instead. What do we do then? I asked quietly. Her gaze softened, but she didn't answer right away. She just stepped forward, closing the smallest distance between us. Close enough that her shoulder brushed mine. Not an embrace. Not a kiss. Just presence. She tilted her head slightly, her voice low enough that I had to lean in to hear. We breathed. For now, that's enough. I nodded, the ache in my chest both sharper and lighter at the same time. Okay, I said. And that was it. No dramatic ending, no declarations. Just her standing beside me on a quiet porch, the two of us letting the silence hold what we couldn't. Time didn't rush after that night on her porch. It stretched, softened, settled. At first, nothing seemed different. We still circled each other quietly, careful not to leave fingerprints on anything too obvious. But the silences changed. They weren't heavy anymore. They were shared, deliberate, something we allowed ourselves to lean into. The cafe came back into our lives, in small doses. Mornings at 8:47 a.m., not 8:45, not 8:50. Somehow, we always landed there together. She'd already have a tea in front of her, steam curling lazily, and I'd order my usual black coffee. The same burnt taste, the same uneven tables, but it didn't matter anymore. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we didn't. And sometimes, the only thing exchanged was a glance across chipped mugs, carrying more weight than words ever could. Once, sitting at the old park bench where everything had nearly tipped over months earlier, she admitted something. I thought I'd regret it if we let this happen, she said, eyes fixed on the gravel at her feet. But I think I'd regret it more if we didn't. I didn't answer. I just rested my hand close to hers, close enough that the space between us felt intentional. Her fingers twitched once, then settled beside mine. Not touching. Not yet. But enough. Her son returned, yes. And for a while, I kept my distance when he was around. But life found a rhythm anyway. Dinners with friends, weekends blurred with errands. And quietly, carefully, the two of us kept finding ways back to each other. It was never a dramatic reveal. No confessions or ultimatums. Just small choices stacked over time. Her pouring me tea even though she knew I'd never liked it. Me folding a napkin the way I'd watched her do once. Her hand brushing the back of my chair when she passed. Tiny gestures. But together, they made something that felt real. One evening, months later, we sat in her kitchen. The citrus candle burned low on the counter. The clock ticked steady. She leaned back against the sink, arms crossed loosely, watching me nurse a cup of coffee I'd made too strong. You always drink it black, no sugar, she said, a faint smile playing on her lips. I smirked. You always say that like it means something. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing in mock challenge. Doesn't it? I laughed, but quietly, because maybe it did. Maybe all these small, ordinary things were what it meant to love someone. Not the declarations, but the noticing. The room felt warm. Not just from the candle, not from the coffee. From her. And when she finally stepped forward, resting her hand on mine as I set the mug down, it wasn't a question anymore. It was an answer we'd already been carrying, quietly, for a long time. Life didn't turn perfect after that. It wasn't supposed to. There were still doubts, still pauses, still the faint edge of risk in every decision. But the quiet had changed. It wasn't lonely anymore. I think back sometimes, to the bench, the knock never made, the unsent text glowing on my phone screen. To the night she told me, this stays between us. And I know now, it wasn't a warning. It was a promise. A promise we kept.